afternoon and welcome to IBA News this Monday the 28th of November. I'm Elon Aslan-Levy and we're live from Jerusalem. The Air Force struck an abandoned UN building on the Syrian side of the southern Golan Heights overnight. The army said the building was used by ISIS as an operations center and was the base for yesterday's attack on a Golani reconnaissance unit conducting an operation in the southern Golan Heights. The strike, said the army in a statement released this morning, was in retaliation for yesterday's attack, which marked the first confrontation between IDF forces and the ISIS-affiliated Khalid ibn al-Walid army. There were no Israeli casualties. Shortly after yesterday's engagement, the terrorists also fired mortar shells, prompting the Air Force to target a truck carrying launchers and mortar shells, killing 4 ISIS operatives. The Security Cabinet has approved the purchase of 17 additional F-35 stealth fighter jets at a cost of more than $100 million each. The purchase brings Israel's total arsenal of the warplane to 50. Ari O'Sullivan has more.
The deal for 17 more F-35 aircraft made by the U.S. aerospace giant Lockheed Martin is not a surprise. It has been on the table and allows the IAF to form 2 full squadrons. Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman had said that he would approve the deal when he attended the rollout ceremony in Fort Worth, Texas in July. In 2 weeks, the first of the initial batch of the F-35s are slated to land in Israel. That deal cost nearly 3 billion shekels. Now, with the additional 17 in the pipeline, Israel hopes to see all 50 delivered by 2021. The F-35 is a stealth fighter because of its ability to evade radar detection. It will be the spearhead of the IAF for the coming decades, more modern than the F-16s and the F-15s, and allow Israel to maintain its qualitative edge over its Middle East neighbors for years to come. 8 other countries are partnered in the production of the jet, and Israel is one of the first countries to receive the aircraft. As part of its offset costs, Lockheed Martin has signed a deal with Israel Aerospace Industries to produce the wings for hundreds of the F-35 jets. Washington gives Israel some $3 billion annually in military aid, most of which must be spent in the U.S. for products like this fighter aircraft. Ari O'Sullivan for IBA News.
The Finance Ministry hopes to begin by tomorrow distribution of a one-off stipend of 2,500 shekels per person for those whose homes were damaged or destroyed in the recent nationwide fires, rendering them uninhabitable. Finance Minister Moshe Kachlon vowed to have the funds transferred within 24 hours to those eligible. Speaking while touring the ruins of the popular Rama's Kitchen restaurant in the Jerusalem Hills community of Nataf, Kachlon repeated that the government will do all it can to eliminate red tape. He said the state will compensate citizens for direct and indirect property damages caused as a result of arson or terrorism, whether or not a citizen is privately insured. The compensation will be given through the tax authority's property tax fund. Authority head Moshe Asher, who accompanied the finance minister today, said a list detailing which fires were determined to be terror will be published on the internet by the end of the day. Those victims whose property was damaged or destroyed as a result of nationalistically motivated arsons will be eligible for compensation by the state and recognized as victims of terror attacks. They will not have to demand the money directly from their private insurance companies. However, in cases where the police and the rescue authority conclude there was no foul play involved, victims will have to rely solely on their private insurance companies. The authority established a call center for victims to apply for an assessment. The number is *4954. Again, that's *4954. More than 100 authority workers have been dispatched throughout the country, primarily to the Haifa area. Separately, the Jewish Agency has offered its own financial aid to Israeli families whose homes were destroyed or damaged in the wave of fires. Each family will be eligible to receive a sum of $1,000. Local authorities, working in conjunction with the National Emergency Authority, will select those who qualify for the financial assistance, which will be provided by the Jewish Federations of North America. Jewish Agency Chairman Natan Sharansky highlighted the unity of Jews around the world who rush to assist Israel in times of need. Police now say that over 1/3 of the fires were sparked by arsonists. This as the public awaits the publication of that official list of fires determined to have been ignited deliberately. Authorities said that although most of the evidence was destroyed by the blaze, they were using forensic samples to determine which fires were ignited intentionally. 21 suspects currently remain under arrest. 6 of them are Palestinians, the rest Israeli Arabs. Meanwhile, Anas Abu Dabis, a 24-year-old Bedouin resident of Rahat, who was arrested for allegedly inciting arson on his Facebook page, was released last night on bail and barred from using the internet for 2 weeks. It transpires the police misinterpreted his explicitly sarcastic remarks, which were intended to condemn those supporting the spate of wildfires on social media. Well, one of the fires in recent days was caused not by arson, but static electricity. Dramatic security camera footage has emerged of a vehicle spontaneously combusting at a petrol station near Kibbutz Ginosar on Saturday. Firefighters say the petrol tank was ignited by static electricity that was discharged through the petrol pump from the driver's body. The female driver was likely wounded when her hair caught fire. Crews were dispatched to the scene, but civilians in the area had already extinguished most of the flaming vehicle. As a major national cleanup begins, many now left with damaged or destroyed property are at a loss as to whom they should contact for assistance. Well, here to shed some light on the situation is real estate lawyer Ben Adoram. Ben, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, Alon. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. There appears to be a bureaucratic battle now between the state appraisers and the private insurance companies. Can you shed some light over what this is about?
I think that in the near future we're going to see a conflict which has already started. I will elaborate about it later, but between the state and the private insurance companies, because the thing is this: property law compensates only for war damages, also including terrorist damages, and the private insurance companies exclude all these damages like war and terrorism. So the state has an interest to say that most fires were naturally ignited.
In order to pass it off onto the private insurance.
Exactly. And vice versa. The private insurance companies have the incentive to say that there were arsons.
So the government will take the load off.
Exactly. And if you will listen to the subtext, you can already hear when the government says that 1/3 was arsons. It has started the conversation with the private insurance companies, because it's actually saying you will be responsible for 2/3. Now, it's a bit difficult to accept that 2/3 were naturally ignited coincidentally on the same time as the arsons.
Well, of course, that's in conditions of extreme weather.
Okay, maybe, but I think that in the end, I think that we're going to see that the insurance companies will try to say that 2/3 were arsons, vice versa.
And so they're haggling over how many
exactly. And in the
arsons.
end, they'll agree on 50-50.
Okay, well, I mean, until now, certain private insurance companies have refused to look into policymakers' claims, claiming that the state appraisers are already involved and therefore it's not their responsibility. What are they basing this claim on?
First, let me make a remark that personally I think it's not very clever, because when an appraiser comes to a house, he takes a picture, takes notes of how this house is right now. In 2 weeks it will look different, and in the end they will have to rely on state appraisers because they will not see it in real time. Now, as we know, certain places are arsons for sure. Certain other places are naturally ignited, and others are in between, open to discussion, open to additional proof. So when the
but are the private insurance companies correct in saying that since the state appraisers are already involved, it's not their responsibility?
Of course not.
No, okay. So could you please illuminate?
Of course not. Because it's not very clever, because they're waiving their right and opportunity to collect proof. Okay. Suppose that they're not doing anything right now, and only state appraisers come. So in 2 weeks, when it will be determined that it was naturally ignited, what will they do?
So for our viewers' benefit, therefore, if their private insurance companies are telling them, no, we're not going to come and appraise it because the state appraisers are involved, they should tell them on the telephone, absolute poppycock, you should be checking this.
Either that or meaning that the insurance companies will have to accept the opinions of the state appraisers.
Briefly, how do you see the situation evolving over the next few weeks? You've mentioned already a negotiation between the state and the companies.
You know that the thing is a little bit complicated because Minister Kahlon said that he's going to take care of everything, but the authority to determine that it was a terrorist arson is not given to him. It's given to Sar Bitachon or the government or the prime minister. So actually he's jumping ahead of his authorities. And what I see is parallel dialogue between the government, between the prime minister and the treasury, and on the one hand, and between the private insurance companies and the state on the other hand. The insurance companies and the state will argue about what portion was arson, and the treasury and the government will argue also who has the authority and what are the proofs. And what I see is a quarrel which will be over the back of the ordinary people.
But eventually they will come to an agreed solution.
Either this, or there is an intricacy, a nuance, because suppose that the government decides that a certain site was an arson, okay? Any private insurance company has the right to try to prove in court that it wasn't.
Why would they want to do so?
What? Vice versa.
Vice versa, okay.
Vice versa,
right. Okay.
sorry. That the government says that a certain site was not...
So this is something that's going to drag on for a while?
I think yes, and also, although the burden of proof is very heavy, any specific insurance company with a heavy exposure may wish to try and lift it up.
Ben, briefly, before we conclude, are we right in understanding that whether or not it's decided that these fires were deliberately ignited, neither the government nor the private insurance companies is going to cover all the losses from the fire damage? People will still have to pay out of pocket.
Yes, of course, because property tax is limited to a specific sum difference, but it doesn't cover jewelry, for example. Because,
property insurance?
Yes, no, property tax. Property tax law.
Okay.
Doesn't cover jewelry, for example, because its purpose is not to restore wealth. Its purpose is to enable people to return to their lives. But
so people shouldn't expect a full return on all their personal belongings.
Never.
Never.
And if you exercise your, if you're in a position to exercise your private insurance, you have the self-participation. So in any case, you don't get the full amount.
Attorney Ben Adoram, thank you very much.
Thank you.
4 members of the Islamic movement in Israel who harassed Jews visiting the Temple Mount and raised funds to pay members to cause such disturbances were indicted at the Nazareth District Court yesterday. Details released by the Shin Bet said the 4, arrested in recent weeks by security forces, were charged with conspiring to commit a felony, membership in an illegal organization, money laundering, and illegal use of property for terrorism purposes. The 4, whose ages range from mid-30s to 60s, are from Arabeh, Nazareth and Kafr Kana, and are all senior members of the Morabitun and Morabitat groups declared illegal by the Defense Ministry last year. According to the Shin Bet, after these organizations were outlawed by Israel, the 4 met in open areas to avoid being wiretapped and succeeded in raising the sum of 250,000 shekels for their cause. A power struggle within the Palestinian Authority over who will succeed President Mahmoud Abbas could lead to an upsurge in terror attacks emanating from the West Bank. So warns the head of the Army's Military Intelligence Directorate, Major General Herzl Halevi. Speaking at a closed conference at Tel Aviv University yesterday, the general described next year as one of instability in the Palestinian Authority, with Hamas and other elements challenging Abbas's leadership. The situation will be especially challenging in Judea and Samaria, he predicted. Major General Halevi described the decrease in terror attacks in recent months as a result of Israel's strategy of exacting a high price from those involved in attacks, while simultaneously avoiding the imposition of collective punishments on the Palestinian populations not involved in the violence. The Gulf Cooperation Council has expressed concern over a missing radioactive device from Iran's Bushehr nuclear facility, which could be used to create a dirty bomb. The material has been identified as iridium-192, defined by the International Atomic Energy Agency as a highly unstable isotope which emits both electrons and gamma rays as a Category 2 radioactive substance capable of permanently injuring or killing human beings exposed to the material within hours or days. The GCC contacted the IAEA over the incident after a report in the Saudi-owned Ashaq al-Awsat newspaper said the radioactive material went missing after the car transporting it from the nuclear reactor was stolen. The car was later discovered by Iranian authorities without the device. Adnan Al-Tamimi, the GCC Emergency Management Center chairman, told reporters that the missing device is set to lose half its power after 74 days of inactivity. He criticized the low safety and security levels at Iranian nuclear sites and the lack of overall transparency in Iran's nuclear program, describing the situation as a cause of concern. Thousands of residents from the rebel-held eastern half of the Syrian city of Aleppo are fleeing amid advances by the Syrian army, which claims to have seized control of the Jabal Badro and Ba'adin districts held by rebel forces. According to Syrian regime reports, dozens of rebels have been killed in the fighting. Opposition organizations reported the Russian bombing of parts of the city and the continued advance of Syrian regime troops. Rami Abdul Rahman, director of the British-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, said opposition forces have lost more than a third of the area they controlled in Aleppo, Syria's second-largest city, which has been part held by rebel forces opposed to President Bashar al-Assad for the past 4 years. Yesterday, fleeing residents were transported by government buses to the Kurdish-controlled western area of the city before being moved to shelters in government-controlled areas. The University of Cambridge is being accused of covering up an anti-Semitic attack against 3 Jewish students last month, downplaying the assault as a scuffle. When 3 Jewish Cambridge students accidentally entered a party of the Christ College Drinking Society last month, they stumbled across a crowd of inebriated and aggressive sportsmen. Shlomo Reuter Jesner from Jerusalem and his friends were wearing kippot.
What happened afterwards was 5 to 7 guys started following us and, calling after us with all different kinds of, dirty Jew, fucking Jew, you don't belong here, what are you doing here, get out of here. It was a sporting event, so the individuals there were not, small people. They were quite, muscular and large, and it was a very threatening atmosphere.
The 3 students reported the incident to Christ's College. The assailants threatened to smash their faces in, they complained. One of the Jewish students was nearly choked with his scarf and was left in tears, considering removing his kippah. Hoping to resolve the matter quietly, the students deferred complaining to the police, pending a college investigation. But a few weeks later, the college declared it case closed, informing them 2 students have been disciplined. College master Jane Stapleton later told press the students in question were disciplined for using foul language and participating in a scuffle, but they denied initiating the physical hostility or using anti-Semitic language, and so no action was taken against them for anti-Semitism. Shlomo says he is not surprised by English anti-Semitism, but is disturbed by what he calls an attempt to brush it under the carpet.
The issue is not the incident. The issue is not that Cambridge students were, attacked by anti-Semites on a college campus. While that's important, it's very sad, but that's nothing new in the UK and it's nothing new in Europe. What's important here is that you have an institution which is meant to be representing all students equally and which is meant to be taking claims of anti-Semitism seriously, which instead is more concerned with, going ahead and covering up the incident and just keeping it quiet and making sure nobody hears about it.
Christ College vigorously denies allegations of a cover-up. In a confidential email to alumni, the college insisted it has no corroborating evidence that any of its students had been involved in anti-Semitic behavior, describing allegations of anti-Semitism and a cover-up, therefore, as misleading. The CCTV footage has no audio, and so it's the word of the 3 Jewish students against that of the suspects. Shlomo Reuter Jesner described the college's denial of the incident's anti-Semitic nature as frankly more hurtful than the incident itself. He is now urging the college to address the incident as an anti-Semitic attack and is considering filing a formal complaint with the police should it fail to do so. Michael Oren, the Deputy Minister for Diplomacy, has urged Israelis to think twice before buying French goods. He made the comment in the wake of France's decision to instruct businesses to label settlement goods, in line with EU consumer guidelines adopted in November 2015. While the EU insists this is categorically not a boycott, merely a clarification that goods from Judea and Samaria are not technically made in Israel, the Foreign Ministry said the French decision can be interpreted as giving a tailwind to radical actors and the boycott movement against Israel. Deputy Minister Oren's statement drew a sharp response on Twitter from the French ambassador, who challenged Oren why he supported a boycott of French goods when boycotting Israeli goods is being punished by French law. French anti-discrimination laws are being used to prosecute BDS activists for inciting discrimination or hatred towards a group based on their national origin. In France, former Prime Minister François Fillon has won the Republican presidential primary, becoming the favourite to enter the Élysée Palace next year. Fillon won some two-thirds of the vote in the second round of voting, beating rival Alain Juppé. France will not put up with its failure, said the victorious Catholic Thatcherite, vowing to give confidence back to the French men and women by boosting employment and growth and beating the fanatics who have declared war on France. A snap poll suggested he would win only 26% at the first round of next year's election, only marginally ahead of the National Front's Marine Le Pen, although he would win the second round decisively. Incumbent President François Hollande has yet to announce whether he will run for a second term, as his Prime Minister Manuel Valls is believed to be considering a bid of his own to head the Socialist Party's ticket in the French Republic. The acrimonious labour dispute between the country's national carrier El Al and its pilots has finally been resolved. Representatives of both sides reached an agreement after a night of marathon talks. Under the new efficiency plan, the pilots will receive a 7.3% increase in wages in exchange for a commitment to reduce the time abroad between flights and to stick to the timetable as they're meant to, cutting the time of flights to New York. The management also agreed to stop chartering foreign planes for El Al flights. In finance, the stock exchange is down and the shekel is mixed. And in weather, tomorrow will be mostly cloudy with seasonal temperatures, more strong winds, and ahead of a possible storm later this week with a chance for light rain tomorrow. And that's all for today. We leave you now with Chabad's annual conference in New York, attempting the world's largest mannequin challenge. But as you can expect, it's not easy to get 4,500 rabbis to keep still.